This is the old man version of Little Red Riding Hood. Little Red Riding Hood is what the town folk called her. When she was very young, she would come to town in an oversized cloak that her grandma gave her, and on top of the cloak, of course, was a Little Red Riding Hood. And she wore that into town until she grew out of it. And at 12 years old, her and her mom made a new one that again was a little bit oversized, so it would fit her way into her teen years. And she still wears that cloak. Reds, as they called her, grew up with her mom and her Uncle Will. Now, her mom worked in town. They needed a steady income during the winter time, and she worked in the hardware store. She worked in the gardening department, but she knew a lot about tools. Her father was a mechanic, and they grew up rural as well. So she knew not only about tools, she knew how to make tools. Uncle Will had worked for 20 years as a Marine, and he retired very young as he started very young. And he knew so much about so many things. And Reds, being homeschooled, was mostly schooled by Uncle Will. And he taught her everything from construction and mechanics and farming to hand combat and marksmanship. She was already good at marksmanship at a very young age. You see, when they needed dinner, Uncle Will would say, "There are too many rabbits out there. It's your job to bring dinner home. Go find a rabbit. I'll show you how to shoot it. And you bring it home and we'll prepare it." Now, Grandma lived pretty close to Reds and her mom. She lived maybe a half hour to 40-minute walk through the woods. And during the summertime in particular, Reds and her mom would go through the woods and visit her mom after dinner and come back before dark. By the time Reds reached her teen years, she would often do this by herself. There was a bad criminal lurking around town. His name was John Wolf, or as they sometimes called him, the Wolf, or the Big Bad Wolf. And he happened to see one day that Reds was going into the woods. He thought, "I'll follow her into the woods and sneak up on her and rob her and hit her over the head." But as Reds was walking, she knew exactly where the wolf was. She heard him and thought, "This guy's a little bit clumsy in the woods. I wonder what he wants." About halfway through, he comes out in the path in front of her and says, "Little girl, where do you think you're going?" He expected Reds to be very scared. Instead, Reds flashed her big smile. And Reds had long flowing red hair and sparkling blue eyes and a smile that put anyone at ease. And she smiled and said, "I'm going to visit my grandma. Want to come?" As if nothing was wrong. Well, the wolf thought to himself, "What a naive little girl. I'll have much more to rob at Grandma's house. So I'll just follow her, go to Grandma's house, knock 'em both on the head, and steal all sorts of stuff." Little did he know that Reds, in one hand in her pocket, had her hand on a firearm. Now, she didn't carry this around to protect herself, per se. Uncle Will thought, well, there might be rabid animals that you might encounter. She never did encounter any such thing, but she always kept the firearm on her. In addition to that, just as a course of her normal work, she had a big sharp knife strapped to her thigh, and she knew how to use it very well. She was quite dangerous, but the wolf didn't know that. So he followed her, and Reds had a way of talking to people that made them very calm. And she started asking the wolf questions, and by his answers, she knew that this is probably a really bad criminal. When they got to the edge of the woods, she slipped away on him, And he's looking around, where'd she go? Where'd she go? Now, Grandma's house was the only house there when they came out of the woods. So Red slipped around the back of the house, jumped in the back window, grabbed some big heavy rope that she knew was there, and got behind the door, cracked open the door. The big bad wolf saw that the door was open. He said, "Oh, I'll just walk right in." As he came in, Reds came from behind, and she was strong as an ox, and put that rope around his neck, pulled and pulled till he passed out, then tied him up with the rope, really, really tight, and called the sheriff. Well, the sheriff came. In the meantime, John's hollering, the wolf is hollering, and Grandma's laughing. She thinks all this is very funny. And the sheriff says, "This guy's on the FBI most wanted list. We've been looking for him for a long, long time. Good work, Reds." And that night, Reds ended up staying the whole night because she was there a little bit longer than expected. Grandma and Reds had a wonderful little party while the big bad wolf was off in prison. The moral of this story, well, there are lots of morals to this story. Why don't you tell me what you think the moral of this story is and write it down in the comments section. Went a little over this time, usually 5 minutes, 3 times a week. This is the old man saying, have a great weekend. See ya.